Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are on for our weekly episode. We talk all things business, family, fitness, and it kind of gravitates towards where we want to talk about it. But today, I wanted to ask you a question. So, when I think about like hard work, old school, gritty, things that I believe in, like in regards to like, we talk about train hard and doing difficult things to help you show up for your family, your friends, your community, because we almost have to put ourselves in these positions because life has become a little bit easier over time. Does it inflict the same emotion on you to see, like, have you ever seen those pictures where they built like the Empire State Building and you got like 10 guys sitting on like a beam eating lunch? Or like I went with that fourth grade trip and I watched a group of guys, like 50 or 100 of them in a mining shaft. Or perhaps like when you see like how the railroad, like that whole like gritty, like building it. Does that inflict an emotion of like, hey, yeah, like in some way, shape or form, when I'm getting after in the gym, like part of my soul was back then, even though I live a much more comfortable life than they lived?
Yeah. I mean, I brought this up a little bit when I was talking about my dad's birthday, because we had spent like that full day doing the electrical for our garage gym. And so I spent the whole day helping him, like literally pulling copper wire through like, 1/2 inch conduit. And after that day, dude, I was so tired. And I told you, like, we work out a lot, like I'm pretty fit. And my dad does that every single day in like the heat of Texas. And it's just like, it's a very like, to me, real world example of exactly what you're saying, in that like, we have gotten soft. Like, I'll admit it. I'll be the first to admit it. Like it's soft in that, like, we work really hard, but we work really hard as far as what we do for a living in like very comfortable setting. Like I have this awesome office that I love. It's air conditioned. I have a nice big screen. I got my blue light blockers to make sure my eyes don't dry out. Like this chair is incredibly comfortable. Like I think it is important to recognize that it was just different back then. And I think that like, if you're self-aware of that, you'll do the work to make sure that you don't get like too soft, instead of just taking for granted that like everything should be comfortable. Because I acknowledge that, like, I work long hours. I'm constantly thinking about work. I try and like push the ball forward all the time, but like, it's all like very, very comfortable work compared to like what I, with my skill sets, would have been doing 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Like, for me, providing back then would have been like long hours, probably doing something manual, like, and that is tough. Like having to commute somewhere, having to, spend long time doing something that, so many things that have come up about like, being exposed to like certain chemicals or whatever. Like, dude, it was so much different and crazy back then. So
dude, it makes you really appreciate like now. I mean, but that's one of the things I'm getting inspiration for some of the new like train hard like gear, and like some of the inspiration that just like calls to me is like that type of imagery. And I'm not saying we have to like, I'm just saying like that type of like,
boy.
No, just like grittiness. I'm not trying to put a mine shaft on a new t-shirt. I'm just saying like, it's inspirational in the sense like these dudes every day got up, got to work, and, and it just makes us appreciate just how work has changed. Now, granted, I'm not sitting down like you are. I'm standing up because I'm trying to get but I am in an air conditioned house, and it's, so speaking of work, I got another question for you. In Texas, is it as bad as it is in California with the tipping culture?
What do you like I think we talked like when you go to like a small cafe shop.
Yeah, dude. Like, so where do you think okay. I think we have talked about this a little bit, but has it changed for you? So has it changed for you at all that if you go into like a coffee shop, or even worse, my buddy said he went to a grocery store and there's a tip option on it. Do you think it's okay to have a tip option at a coffee shop? And if so, what percentages do you think should be listed there?
I kind of have a different view on it, just because like for all intents and purposes, like I live in a very small town, and we go to one coffee shop all the time. It's like our spot. And it's funny. I don't think we've talked about this on the podcast, and I think I've meant to. My like always like dream was to be a regular somewhere. Like there's something like about being a regular.
Friends.
dude, like just
where everybody knows your
us.
name.
Dude, they know us. They know the kids. They like knew when we were away for a couple weeks because Charlie came. Then they were excited to see her. Like that is our spot. It's like a little. It's called Pecan Town Books and Brews. Shout out Pecan Town Books and Brews. And it's like they like do some like light lunch food, but it's a coffee shop. And then it's also a bookstore. So they have like a little kids corner and stuff. It's perfect. But because that would be the only place that would really apply to me here that is kind of like that. All right, well, I went in and I got like a cold brew, like, they took the pitcher, put it in a cup and gave it to me. Like, how much am I really tipping on something like that? But for me, it's different because I feel like, there's like a handful of small businesses in downtown Seguin. Like I tip and I tip every time because I feel like that's me like keeping money in like my small community, something that like, it's one of the things that we love about where we live and like having this like very, very small town feel to it. So that I think is a little bit different. I think I would feel different if I was maybe going to a Starbucks. Maybe I would feel different if it was, if I lived in a bigger city or whatever. But it doesn't irk me as much as I think it irks you. But I also like, I'm not visiting that many places that have that option. Like, I think it would be different if I worked in town and like, I was getting lunch on a regular basis and it was kind of like a very quick, like, they just ring you up and it's like, do you tip? I can see that being like what am I really tipping here for? But because of the places I go, it doesn't bother me at all. And I just do.
Yeah. I just got to level set my expectation because I have committed to every time, everywhere I go, I always tip and I always tip like appropriately. That's just like you and I have talked about this, like giving. And I made the commitment that I will always tip and always tip. Like,
but now it's popping up everywhere.
Well, dude, so that's been like my commitment, right? Is that I'm always tipping. So like at restaurants, at anywhere I can, I'm going to tip. I'm going to try and tip so that someone says, oh, wow, that guy was generally generous. That's what I'm hoping for. Right. But as of lately, like, dude, Ava and I, we go for morning walks and we go to a place called Blue Bottle Coffee. And it's in Los Gatos, California. And dude, the coffee she gets is $8 for a coffee. And then when the tip screen comes up, I'm expecting, 10, 15, 20. No. 20, 25, 30%. I'm like, dude, I made a commitment to myself. Dude, always be generous. But it's like, it's starting to like creep in, But anyways, maybe I need to level set the expectations. But yeah, I just hope that, over time, I think COVID kind of switched things up a little bit in the service industry. And I just hope that these people are making money. I hope that, I want to see people be successful and thrive. But it does maybe need a recalibration at times because I wonder if the younger generations, they forget like some of that grit, some of that, it's just a tough time with all the digital and how you want instant gratification. And that's where I think this tipping cultures came even more and more and more because these people are like, well, maybe we could add, increase. But eventually at some point, I think it'll have to shift back a little bit. But in the meantime, I will continue to tip and be generous because that's a commitment I made a long time ago. But it still bothers me a little bit.
I mean, tipping culture in general is weird. And people talk about this all the time, like tipping at restaurants. Like it's just why, what definitely bothers me is like, I don't like people tying how much they tip to like potentially things that are like outside of the server's control, which like people, I feel like people do all the time. It's like, well, my meal, like I worked as a server. I worked one summer at this like super busy brunch spot in Manhattan when I was in college. And I think everyone should work in like either retail or like the service industry for a year because it opens your eyes to so many things. And I think it makes you like incredibly more empathetic because you see some of the best in people, but you also see some of the worst in people when you work in service. And dude, I remember there are more times than I can recount where, dude, it's stuff that like you could have done nothing to change it, but the person feels like, well, my food was not great, so I hereby give you a lesser tip. Like, dude, what are we doing here? Like, Louis C.K. actually has a really funny bit about it, but that bothers me. It bothers me that like people are like, judging on a scale from 1 to 10, how the overall experience is. And then they like, give you
But like, I don't know, playing devil's advocate on that is like, if I'm at a restaurant and the kitchen's way backed up and the server like can just come by and be like, hey, just letting you know, the kitchen's way backed up. And there is a way that they could like service further. I don't know. What do you think it's going to look like 10, 20 years from now? Do you think it's going to still be the same thing? Or do you think things are going to shift? Or are robots and AI going to be serving us food, right? Like, dude what's going to happen?
I think the world is going to be irrecognizable 20 to 30 years from now. Dude, tipping is going to be the least of the things that are different 20 and 30 years from now. I was listening on this podcast about, have you gone to San Francisco yet and ridden in I see them in Mountain View too all the time. The Wahoo.
Yeah, woo or whatever it is. Yeah, they
have you gotten in one?
I haven't. My father-in-law is involved in it, and he set up some of the parking lots where, dude, they basically these self-drive cars go find this parking lot. They have like a little robot thing that recharges them, and then boom, boom, boom. But I haven't been in one yet. So it kind of freaks me out, dude.
The host on the podcast went out on his trip and he was talking about it. And like his initial thoughts were like, once you actually get in one and experience it, it became so obvious to him that like, no one's going to drive in like 10 years. Like it's inevitable at this point, because if you think about how all technology advances, right? Like right now, and then you extrapolate 5-10 years from now, like the fact that this is already happening, just how much better it's going to get. And he made it sound great in that, like, I mean, yes, sure, it might be a little sketchy now because the technology is relatively new, but that's going to get so much better. And also like driving is really dangerous because like people are distracted when they drive all the time. Like, sure, the technology might not be great, but there's a lot of like really bad accidents that happen just because we, human error, distracted drivers, tired drivers, drivers under the influence. That's incredibly dangerous. Now imagine if you can eliminate all of that and now make it, everyone is just robots driving around. Also, you can eliminate traffic. Like he brought up a really interesting point where like, if you've ever looked into like what causes traffic, it's in many times is human error. It's like one person stops short for no reason and that backs literally everything up. Now, if none of that is happening, you eliminate traffic. The other point that he brought up, and then I'll get off of this, that's just really interesting, is like most cars spend most time idle. They're always like just parked. Like, okay, you don't drive your car all the time. And if we get to the point where we don't have to drive and all this is autonomous, there would be a case for like your car wouldn't just work when you need it. You wouldn't really own a car. And then this car would go pick up someone else and pick up someone else. So it would be driving 24/7, which would significantly reduce the amount of cars we need, period, which would mean there's a lot more parking, which would mean just less congestion. Because if you think about it, imagine if you only needed your car when you needed it and the rest of the time it was serving a bunch of other people, then imagine how many fewer cars we would need overall. So yeah, it was an interesting podcast, but that got me thinking too.
That's a next step, right? Because like the first step would be, how do you utilize this as kind of like a Uber, right? And then basically the technology becomes in your own car. And then maybe it becomes like because dude, I mean, I wouldn't want to, like, if I wanted to go to the store right now, I wouldn't want to have to wait for whatever the name, Wahoo, to come up and pick me up and take me to the store, right? So they'd have to get the technology down for that. But what's really interesting too is, so my father-in-law is deep in the AI space, and especially here in the Bay Area, man, and it's crazy with AI companies, NVIDIA and their chips. So these chips and the data is like compounding, right? Like back in the day, you used to have X amount of storage in a space. Now it's like 10,000 times. And these server rooms are becoming massive. And now they're even talking about how do they keep them cold? So they, the energy requirements in these server rooms. And now there's like some cold storage where they're not only using air conditioning, but they're actually doing it in cold water because the circuit boards and the storage are so hot. I just found it to be interesting how fast this stuff is moving. And I think AI, we've talked about this a little bit, but like AI to me is like the way the internet was like 20 years ago. A lot of people, they kind of heard about it. Maybe they dismissed it, but AI is definitely here and it's going to be here to stay for a long time. I imagine.
Dude, 100%. I mean, I heard that there's some of the big companies, I forget, like Microsoft, Google, whatever, that are building their own nuclear reactors next to where they're going to have like the servers for this, because that's how much power this takes. Like wherever state these, servers are, like the grid of the state can't support how much power it needs. So the actual companies are going to make like a nuclear reactor just to provide power for these things. It's pretty wild, man.
Yeah. So it's a true story. There was a gentleman, there's a story. Again, I was from some of the people here. This guy bought up a bunch of land and then he created his own power plant on it. And then basically leased the power plant and the location to, I don't know, name the company, Google, right? And is making gazillions of dollars because power became such a big issue. But yeah, it's a really interesting time, especially with AI. So I'm over at my dad's house the other day and he was like, kind of, talking crap on AI, right? And I was like, hey man, like, dude, it's pretty sharp. And he goes, let me test it. And so my dad's like saying all this stuff to it, asking all these things. So he's like, all right, I got something that's going to stump him. He goes, ask AI if they can say the Lord's Prayer in ancient Aramaic, right? Because he speaks Assyrian, which is like the original language of Christ, like really old language, right? And so I'm like, okay, Dad, it's going to be able to do it. And he's like, there's no way. So sure enough, I ask ChatGPT, I'm like, hey, can you say the ancient Aramaic, blah, blah. And boom, just perfect. And in my dad's face, just like, just drops. He's just like, he couldn't believe it, but it's a testament to the technology for sure. You're on a mute or something.
Yeah. That's also an interesting testament to like, just the difference in generations too, of like what he would think would be like the really hard thing for it to know. Cause it's hard from like there are very few humans out there that would know it. But to me, that's actually such an easy prompt from like it's very searchable and very precise. Right. So I think that it's also a good example of how, and like, I'm not saying anything bad about like older generations, because it's funny, like there's definitely going to be a time where like, I probably say something and Shay's like, Dad, how could you even fucking ask that question?
I am that guy already. Like,
yeah, like
and like the terminology and stuff these kids use, dude.
Yeah. But it's, that was really interesting about that too. But yeah, man, dude, like I remember, damn, what was it? It was like ChatGPT had just came out, man. And I dove in head first. And I think that like, if we can pull any maybe piece of advice or anything out of this, and something that served me, I think really, really well, has been like, whether this stuff is here to stay or not, when it's new and people are talking about it, I think that educating yourself on it, you don't lose anything by doing it. Like it's 100% a win-win, because you'll either learn and understand why something like that just didn't take off, and then great, you can take those lessons elsewhere, or it becomes a big thing and you're 3 steps ahead of everyone that spends, a year saying, oh yeah, like it's just a fad, or it's just this, or like, or thinking that they're better than using a tool like that. Because now I'll tell you, man, like knowing how to use it well is just, I think one of the skill sets that I probably utilize the most. And I think that a big part of that is just like, why wouldn't you want to learn everything about this? And again, I'm not claiming to be any AI expert, but definitely someone that's always, whether it comes to nutrition, training, other stuff, like if there's something that sounds interesting, like, dude, just go all in, experiment, figure it out, play around with it. Like you'll learn something from it. I promise.
Well, you're going to have those skills forever. Well, it's like me with the shooting sports, right? And I'm learning so much about the shooting sports. And dude, it's just an Old Testament that you and I say, like, for example, your flight school, you spent, let's just say for the sake of the argument, 100 hours. And all of a sudden you have way more skills than the average person, like a gazillion fold. And it's not like you committed that much time to it. I mean, you committed time to it, don't get me wrong, but like, it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu, same thing with shooting, same thing with AI. Like if you could just say, hey, I want to, develop this additional skill. I put up a post on Instagram the other day. I was at jiu-jitsu on Sunday with this open mat, and these young bucks come in, man, 19, 20-year-olds. These are big kids. One of them lived in Israel and was just home for the summer. The other one went to Cal Poly.
Post, yeah.
Yeah, big kids, right? Like big, like strong young men. I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? And, they were newer to jiu-jitsu, but it was just a good example where I asked the kid how old he was. He said 19. And I think for the first time in basically ever, I'm sitting there being like, dude, I am double this kid's age. Like I felt old at the moment, right? And then we rolled and I didn't feel so old, but it's just a good example where it would have been easy for me just to fall into this trap. Like, hey, I'm double your age. I'm just going to kind of like be over here and put some icy hot on my legs. And instead my mentality is like, hey, let's get after it. And I still want to be able to have that competency. And it was from learning new skills and training hard.
For sure, man. For sure. I mean, that's the goal, right? The goal is to be the guy that can continue to turn heads. I love, and for me, it hasn't been an age thing yet. It probably will be pretty soon, but there's no better feeling than being underestimated for your ability for whatever reason, whether it's age or whatever, and then be able to prove people wrong.
Well, I sent you that Slack as a, potential newsletter for the future. Just like one thing that feels good for me is like, whenever I'm training or doing anything, it's like, oh dude, I didn't realize you were that old. And it's like, I think the way you get there is by obviously taking care of yourself. And, you want to have energy and enthusiasm, all those kind of things help. But at the end of the day, dude, if you're super fit, you look a lot younger. So for me, I'm on that almost 40 train. Like I'm trying to look like I'm, 30, I'm trying to look like I'm 32 forever.
And I think there's also a mentality to it too, right? Like, we always say that we're trying new things and signing up for new things, but there's also this mentality that a lot of people do unfortunately lose of like, you hit a certain age and you don't take up new hobbies. You don't want to learn new skills. And I think that, yes, like the physical hard work will help you look a certain way and give you a certain fitness level, but it's also just the mentality of like, I am going to sign up for my first marathon now and train for it. And I am going to look for what's the next thing I can do and the next thing I can do and the next thing I can learn. And like never just being like, well, old dogs don't learn new tricks. I think that that's something that, people use as an excuse when they get to a point where, either they're in a rut or they just feel like, they can't find something that fires them up anymore. But I think constantly seeking and finding those things and then making life work to be able to pursue them, I think is very important.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, we have the Tactical Games, then HYROX, and then, which I'm excited for the HYROX. I am. I think there's quite a few people that listen to this podcast are getting excited about it because it is accessible. And then I think the next thing on my list will probably be back to jiu-jitsu. I think in 2025, I want to get into a jiu-jitsu match. And one of the reasons for that is I got my brown belt in December of 2023. And it takes a little while to kind of build back up to that curve, like where you were at, let's just say like a higher level at purple belt, and then you get your next belt. Now you're like kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. So you got to kind of, train to get back to a level where you feel like you're comfortable with. So we'll see, but that's probably the next thing on my list.
All right, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have coming up on the Train Hard app in the month of July. So we're halfway through the year, which means that all the programs on the Train Hard app are entering a new training phase for the months of July, August, and September. So if you've been waiting, if you've been thinking about joining the Train Hard app, now is a great time to do it because we're turning the page on the first half of the year and going into brand new focuses. Force is going to be focused on building some raw strength in the back squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. We're also going to be working on developing some strength in some body weight movements, the pull up, the dip. So just a lot of really great structured strength work, as well as the conditioning to make sure that you keep that engine going strong. So a lot of strength focus and force. So if you're trying to get strong this summer, absolutely something to check out. And then on the flex side, we have a brand new training phase as well. And that first 6-week cycle as part of that training phase is going to have a big focus on these giant sets. So 5 exercises per muscle group that you'll do in quick succession. So you'll do something like a bench press, then you'll go dumbbell bench press, then you'll go incline dumbbell bench press, then you'll do dips, and then you'll do push-ups back to back to back. The pump on these sessions is unreal. And I promise you, if you're trying to build muscle, if you've struggled to put on a little bit of weight, this is going to be the way to do it. This is going to be the way to improve your body composition. I'm super excited. And then the last thing is we now also have past cycles of Flex available as an ebook. So if you're just not trying to download another app, you don't want to be on a monthly subscription, you can now access Flex specifically by going on the Train Hard shop and purchasing the ebooks for either just a 6-week cycle or the full first training phase of the year. So highly recommend checking that out. Highly recommend getting on the Train Hard app. Let's get strong. Let's get big. Now let's go back to the podcast. I think I know the answer to this question. So 2 questions actually. First, have you decided if you want to be under 200 pounds for HYROX? Are you making that commitment? Can you make that commitment? What are you at right now?
Right now?
Right now. If you were to step on a scale right now.
Right now, I'm probably 214.
Okay. Dude, that's not crazy.
No, it's not crazy. I mean, now I'm actually really curious because I hover between it, like if I'm after training, oh dude, I'm like at 208, after like jiu-jitsu training. Sure. But I'm probably walking around at like 214. The question becomes, okay, let's just say I drop 14 pounds. Okay. Why? Well, would I be lighter to run? For sure. Would it impact my other things at HYROX? No, not really. Would I look more jacked? Maybe a little bit. But do I care? I don't know. I'm trying to I'm weighing the pros and the cons because it will take some commitment. Like I'll be able to drop, but if I want to actually see 199, I mean, I just haven't seen it in as long as I can remember, dude.
14 pounds is, especially at your weight, is not that bad. I don't think the commitment would be that much. But
I saw 200 on the scale not that long ago, like a year ago when I was doing a jiu-jitsu tournament. I have not seen 199. So, and maybe that's a story to tell. I don't know.
So that was my second question. I think I know the answer, but for jiu-jitsu, competing in jiu-jitsu, it's by belt, but also by weight, right?
Yeah. So one other thing that you could probably motivate me by is that there's a weight class, there's 208, and then there's 222, and that's with the gi on. So right now I compete at 222 with the gi on because the gi is like 3-4 pounds. And
you got to do 208. Lean fighting machine. Come on.
I have done 208 before, but it requires you to cut down. And so, dude, I competed my first, no, maybe not my first, my first competition.
You cut back on the mezcals and you'll melt that weight away.
Yeah,
but you got to change anything else.
No more mezcal. What was I doing? I want to say one of my first competitions, it might've been my first. I competed at 208 at white belt, and I show up, maybe it was my first competition at blue belt, and they weigh you in right before you compete. And I was 0.2 ounces over. So I was 208.2. And so I ran around the parking lot, and it was just a terrible way to show up for the event because you just have no energy. You're all stressed out. It's just not the way I want to go. So if I am going to drop to 208 a weight class, I would want to clearly be at 202 without a gi on. So I have, I'm just fully comfortable.
And you've never counted macros, right? Like you've never gone that route.
I've done zone.
Right.
But I would definitely be careful. I would definitely not be in favor of some very restricted diet.
So that's the benefit. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to, and I know that a lot of people listening, because this is most people out there, you want to quote unquote put on muscle and burn fat. And I think that, for a long time, I was also in this camp of counting macros, it's a lot of work. Is it obsessive to, put everything on a scale or measure everything before you eat it? Should that be how you handle food? And the thing that I've learned from now, I would say weighing my food consistently for probably 2.5 years is that it just, the more you do it, the less you have to do it. Because the more you do it, the more it just educates you. I know now, for me, weight gain or weight loss is incredibly simple in that I know exactly the changes I need to make. And the biggest thing and the point I'm trying to get to is that they're not big changes. I think where a lot of people struggle with weight loss specifically is that they go super restrictive because they want to lose weight and they want to lose weight fast. And they do. They get the results that they want. You could do a 30-day, paleo challenge. You could do no sugar for 30 days. You could do 75 hard and do something crazy, and you will absolutely lose weight. But the problem is that you do something very restrictive that just isn't sustainable, and the pendulum always swings in the opposite direction. The beauty of learning, okay, what am I eating? How much protein is that? How many carbs is that? How many calories is that? Is for me, the difference between, hey, I'm now gaining weight or I'm losing weight is 300 calories, maybe 400 if to do it right. I'm not going to lose weight in a week, 2 weeks. I'm not going to like absolutely like disappear. I'm also not going to bulk up significantly, but I don't want to do that anyway, because the faster you gain weight, the more fat you gain versus muscle. And then the faster you lose weight, the more muscle you lose versus fat. So if your goal, which most people's goal is to like improve their body composition, you want to lose weight, but make sure you're prioritizing losing fat, not losing muscle. And if you want to gain weight, you want to bulk up lean tissue, which is muscle and not fat. So you want to do it slow. You need to be patient. And if you're doing it slow and doing it right, the difference between being in a surplus and being in a deficit is so minuscule.
Minute, yeah.
That you don't need to change too much. Like whatever you're doing now, like take a third of the serving off of like whatever a carb is that you have, maybe skip one snack, maybe replace like fruit for, you know, the cereal, or go half the cereal with the fruit. And yeah, when it comes to people that, you know, like enjoy having a drink when they go out, great. But if you're having 5 drinks a week, make it 4, make it 3. The difference of those small changes, a lot of people think, well, it's too little of a change. It's not going to give me the result I want fast enough. But if you just do that for long enough, you'll get it. And now it's sustainable because it doesn't feel like you cut out alcohol because you enjoy it, or you completely cut out the cereal at night because you enjoy it. Like just cut back a little bit. And in 3 weeks, you won't even notice that you cut back. That'll just be your new baseline. And that to me is the biggest thing that I've learned by consistently counting, is how little you actually need to change. And also just the value of being just consistent over a long enough time, because there'll be a weekend where, you know, we go get Mexican food and I have like, you know, 3 trays of chips before the meal even comes. And then like I have the meal too, because I don't want to not eat it and I'm completely stuffed. And I'll wake up the next day like 3 pounds or 2 pounds over. But people also have to realize that that doesn't mean that you gain 2-3 pounds. That means that you ate a lot of salty food and you retained a lot of water. If you just go back, not even to like, oh, I'm going to starve myself today to get back to that. If you just go back to doing what you were doing before, in 2-3 days, you're right back at baseline. So I think that like all those things have taught me so much, to where now like me managing my nutrition and my body composition is just so, or at least it feels so easy, because I know how little of a change it is. And it's making a little change is always easy. Like, hey, I'm going to swap out, you know, this thing for that thing. And that's it. Everything else stays the same. Like no big deal. And now I'm losing weight versus gaining. So anyway, that was,
I'm going to see. I still haven't made the commitment yet. I made the commitment. I've been doing a lot of training for Tactical Games. I really want to show up there and look like I know what I'm doing. And then the HYROX thing, I mean, dude, that's just, I just got to run. I got to run.
Yeah, you got to run.
I got to run. In the words of Neil Maddox, you know, we talked about this on the podcast.
Oh, dude, that is a fantastic story.
We got to run.
Such a good story.
While we're on it, I will share that. So if you haven't gone back on the podcast, long time ago,
it's worth sharing it.
Many years ago, long before CrossFit was like a very professionalized or where it is today, we competed in this competition called the Sacktown Throwdown. I talked about this on the podcast. Maybe, I don't know, what was that, like over a year ago, something like that?
It was a while ago. But,
and the Sacktown Throwdown was, they hosted it like this area that happened to have like a NASCAR track, like a mini track. And, you know, at that point with CrossFit, I mean, some would argue even still today, they're always trying to reinvent the wheel and trying to, you know, come up with the next, you know, kind of thing. And that year they happened to have access to a police car and ropes. And what they did is it was a team competition where it was 2 men, 2 women, and you pull this police car around a track for time. That was the event. And the long story short, it was me and 3 of my teammates, and we get like 3/4 of the way down the track. And I look at my partner, his name's Pat, and I was like, hey man, it's time to kick it into gear. And at that point we had already been primarily taking most of the slack on the ladies' ropes. There was a little bit of slack there. Him and I were in general pulling the car because there was a lot of momentum that had already been built. And so what I hadn't taken into consideration going into this race was fatigue and tying the rope around ourselves. So at the time, all we thought about was like, how do you win? Well, we wanted to be able to get good arm position. So we all tied the rope around our body so we wouldn't have to hold it. Now, that was already like problem number 1. Like, like looking back on it, why would anybody tie themselves to a moving vehicle around a track? And the answer was, you're trying to win. That's the answer. Like, trying to win, Gabe. Like, there's no other option. So sure enough, boom, 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 boom. We're pumping 3/4 of the way in. We got 1/4 left. I look at Pat. I'm like, bro, let's knock this thing out. And dude, we hit into hyper mode, right? And one of the ladies on our team, the car was going so fast that the slack was picking up, and she started to fall back. And it's actually on GoPro, and the rope went underneath the car and it pulled her in to the car because it got tied up underneath the car because she, unfortunately, her running wasn't able to keep up with the car's pace. And fortunately, there was someone in the car that just slammed on the brakes, and Pat and I just go, dude, in the video, it doesn't look that bad, but dude, I felt like I just got lit up like right off my feet. So the situation happens. We ended up finishing, and it was pretty traumatic. Like she really could have gotten hurt, and we're so grateful she didn't. And so we get back home, and like everybody like kind of on edge, like, man, she almost got really ran over by a car. Like, this was not good. And all of us are very compassionate, very loving about it. And then Neil comes up, our training partner. He's just like, hey, girl, you got to run, and just walks away. And it's a good reminder for me on this HYROX, like, Jay, you got to run. You got to put in the work. And so that's kind of where that story went. Oh, dude, man.
I cannot imagine. There. Oh my God. The Neil drop was savage.
It's just a savage, because if you know Neil Maddox, this guy, jacked, super fit. Speaking of someone who's just aged well and just like absolutely still a specimen. But just the way he said it, like the rest of us are like trying to be like very like,
yeah,
it's just him, matter of fact,
versus like, God,
dude. Well, hopefully we don't finish HYROX and you come up to me and like, bro, hey Jay, you got to run, man. Like, you got to run. Dude, what do you think is a good mile goal? What do you think is a good, if you said, hey, as a partner, what do you think I should be able to run a mile in to contribute to the team?
So it's an 8K, which is a 5 mile. It's kind of tough to say, right? So we're going to do a 5 mile race, but it's broken up every K into these stations. And without having done it before, it's impossible to know how like that fatigue is going to kind of build up. But I think that if I would say that I could comfortably, or at least at that point, definitely, because I'm running a lot now. I could comfortably run those like 1K runs at like at least a 6-minute mile pace. Like, but I think that, again, I think that the strategy here, because dude, when it comes to the rower, the skier, like, dude, I don't think there's going to be anyone at that event that would be able to like honestly beat you in standalone of those types of events. Definitely not. And so I think that what we should plan to do, and I don't know if we should speak our strategy publicly, but what we should plan to do is like find a pace.
If you're competing in HYROX team event, please turn the podcast off. If you're not, then keep listening.
I'd like to think that if we find a pace that's like pretty, like not easy for me, but that like feels challenging for you, knowing that you're going to get a rest when we get to the stations, and I can start whatever station. So you just kind of like, just get a second, and then you go and like get moving on whatever. And then we switch one last time and I just finish it out and we go straight into the run. I think might be a really good way. Cause then for you, it turns into like intervals versus like, having to like be on the whole time. But I don't know, maybe we'll talk to Hinshaw about it.
Yeah, we got to talk to Hinshaw about it. If you haven't gone back and checked out that podcast, you need to do so. That was an incredible episode. But yeah, I mean, look, you guys are hearing us talk strategy.
When you were running a lot, you were fast. Because I remember watching videos of you doing like, I remember, dude, I went out on the track after I watched this video. I was like, I have to do that. When you did the 10-800s on the track, 1-to-1,
3 minute off. Yeah.
That's a 6-minute mile pace the whole time.
Right.
With like, dude, that engine's in there. You just got to give it like
I just got to get it back.
A little shining, just make sure that, everything's still lubricated and ready to go, and you're all good, man.
Yeah, the 6 minute mile was never an issue for me. Like running 6 minute miles, it's just doing that repeatedly over many times is where it gets tough. So yeah, it's just right now, dude, my legs, for anybody who hasn't ran a lot, it's like, and some days feel better than others, right? I was running yesterday, I felt good. I ran the day before, I feel like I had cinder blocks on my feet. So like, I think it just depends on the training I'm doing and the volume. So, but we will be putting out a more consistent program that I'll be following, which I think will be helpful for me, because it's hard for me to get motivated to go out and like run. I don't particularly like love it, but I do like going to the track. I don't like it on the street, but I like the track because I have like a lap by lap goal that I could hit. So like, if you're out there and you're struggling to run, one recommendation I would have that really changed the game for me was like, some people hate the tracks, it's boring. I like it because it gives me a lap by lap, quarter by quarter, half by half goal that I'm trying to look at my clock and see if I'm maintaining. It's like a game to me.
When you worked with Hinshaw, did you do any like just long, easy work, or was most of the stuff like paced and at the track?
A lot of it was paced at the track, and then we would do like a lot of time on your feet. So like the longest I ran like 23 or 24 miles in the hills one time with him in preparation for the CrossFit Games. I did 12 miles with him, and then Miranda and I think it was just Miranda showed up, and I ran 12 miles with her. And oh man, that brings back some good memories, dude.
What were you doing for nutrition on those long efforts? Do you remember?
We weren't optimizing as much as we could. We probably could have had like better goos and stuff like that. But I think also we wanted to get our body to a state of fatigue. And, at times when we were doing some of these events, we weren't trying to optimize the nutrition. We were trying to like, and looking back on it now, there probably could have been a better way of doing it. But at the time, we didn't really like hit goos in sessions and stuff like that. We really tried to like just prioritize the run, whatever it was, and then move on to the next thing. I think if I could do it over again mid-run, I would have gotten better about trying to take on some of those nutrition components.
Yeah, I think that's just the nature of how the sport has evolved, right? Like now you need to get every advantage that you can because, with the coach I've been talking to and also just everything I've read, like you're not creating like, I think there's that misconception that you're creating like additional adaptation by like depriving yourself of these things. Whereas it's kind of the other way around. It's like, if you're well fueled, you're just going to be able to go harder, which creates better adaptation. Like you don't get any benefit from running on E or, like not having enough electrolytes and potentially cramping. Like that stuff doesn't necessarily create, you to be tougher in those circumstances. It's just kind of hindering what you're getting out of the session. Actually,
now that you mention it, dude, I think I told you this before, but like, so I finished this race and I didn't have my phone for these 24 miles. And I had to meet Ashley at like a party. And I had to dress up nice.
That's so classic.
Well, that's Ashley. Like, honestly, like the amount of bullshit she's dealt with me, the amount of times that I could think of where I've been sweaty and showed up to dinner or taken a shower, still been wet and like just in my boxers and jumped in the car and she would drive. Dude, it's countless. But I finished this run and at the time I'm like, oh shit, I'm late. I got to go meet Ashley. So I get in the car and I start driving down this hill and I start feeling very fatigued. To your point, like I was on E. And I was like, dude, I need water. I had no water, no nothing. And so I had my shirt off and I'm like messed up. So I pull into a gas station and I had no shirt on, just some shorts on. I had no shoes on. I walk in, I'm just like, basically like, I must have looked like a zombie to this guy. I'm like, but I need water, like fucking falling all over the place. Anyways, I ended up getting water, getting some Gatorade, getting some sugar. And I instantly felt better thereafter. But it's a good testament to like, I think there was a time in my life that I thought, hey, the more fatigued I get, the better adaptation I'm going to get. But I think that really like the better effort I put in, the better adaptation I'm going to get. And if there was a way for me not to feel that way, I should have tried to do it. You know what I mean? It also would have built in good habits on how my body adjusted to those things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Hey man, before we get off, I do think that this is worth kind of noting. And I know that some of this stuff is, we intentionally avoid like talking about because stuff's very polarizing. Politics in general is super polarizing. But the one thing that I at least wanted to bring awareness to for anyone that hasn't kind of read up on this story specifically, but so we're recording this on July 16th. So just this past weekend was the assassination attempt on former President Trump, now candidate Trump. And the one story from that really broke my heart, honestly, dude, was this guy, the guy who was unfortunately a fatality in the shooting.
Yeah.
Corey Compatore, who was a firefighter, and the wife and the daughter, they told this story. She made this beautiful post about who this guy was in his life, and he heard gunshots, man, and dove on top of his daughter and his wife to protect them. And that's the reason he ended up getting shot. And I just, we talk a lot about, being a protector on this podcast. And I just, it seemed wrong to me, even though we don't need to get into the politics of this whole thing or whatever, that stuff's unnecessary, but it would seem wrong to me to not at least acknowledge what is a hero and what is like the ultimate, I think, embodiment of what we talk about, and something that, obviously I hope we're never in a situation anywhere near as tragic or dire, but that I genuinely hope that I would be that guy too, man. Like, we talk about this stuff all the time, but the guy actually did it, died a hero. And I don't know, it just, to me, it's something that, this is probably the biggest platform that I have. And it just seemed wrong not to, at least give this guy some acknowledgement, regardless of how you guys feel about Trump, politics, this election, whatever. I would definitely read up on his story, who he was, what he did. And I just think it's such an incredible example of everything we talk about. So.
Yeah, I happened to be watching that live. So I was watching it live when it happened. I was just shocked, obviously. And since then, a bunch of stuff's came out, and, Tim's put out some stuff, and a bunch of other people.
Did you listen to the Chris Williamson podcast?
I've listened to like half of it, and I'm still trying to make it. I would love to, I've kind of waited to pass judgment on some of these things until more information comes out, because I think that's important. I think it's easy to be reactive in these situations and be like, why didn't they do this? And it's like, well, actually this happened. So I've just been waiting for more and more information, but nonetheless, what you're bringing up, like, there's no other information that is needed other than the fact that this gentleman heard gunshots and protected his family. And like, it's unfortunate to me that it's just kind of, it is the situation where, you had a former president assassination attempt, and it will be the highlight story, of course. But within that, I believe 2 other people were severely injured. And then you had another gentleman here who passed away. The whole situation is just like, I don't know. We should have someone come on once more information comes out. I mean, Nick Freitas, we're talking about having him on the show here soon. I know he has some opinions on this as well.
Yeah.
I'd just kind of talk through some of this stuff. I just feel like there's so much more to the overall story to understand, whether it's competency with how this could happen, whatnot. But the story you're bringing light to, I think you make a really good point. It's like, a lot of us pride ourselves, myself included, on wanting to be that guy. And he was that guy when it mattered most, right? To protect his family. And it's super, super sad and unfortunate. And I hope that more attention is drawn to him, right? And I think there hopefully will be. I think there's been a little bit to this point, but hopefully more over time, there'll be even more attention on these heroes who stepped up that day, including, like, I saw some interviews with some ER doctors who really tried to step up and help on the moment. Yeah, I saw that too, man. Stories like that, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that obviously this is, dude, if I'm Trump right now, I mean, you talk about faith, you talk about, how can you not feel like this was just like a miracle for him? Like, dude, he's 1 inch in opposite direction and he's not here with us. It's just, the whole situation is just like, it's crazy.
Wild. It's wild. It's, yeah, dude, it's crazy because, like, recently there was a presidential candidate in Ecuador that was assassinated, and, South America, there's a lot of drug issues there. Like, these are things that, like, you hear about only happen in other countries where, like, you're always like, things are crazy over there. Like, it would never happen here.
Right.
And yeah. It's, dude.
And then for it to be a 20-year-old who was registered as a Republican, but made like a small donation to a Democratic Party. But then the crazy part about it is, when you talk about society and hate and the way people talk about each other, is that this guy was 12 years old when Trump was in office.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy to think about. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think will be really powerful. And at some point, I don't know exactly who to have on to talk more about this, but I think once more information comes out, it'd be cool. It'd be good to understand where some of the pitfalls were that enabled this to occur, because obviously there was a breakdown in security for this to happen. And it's terrible.
Yeah, man. Tragic.
But I will say, I mean, it doesn't matter if you love them, hate them, nonetheless, for someone to get shot through the ear and not really know what was going on at the moment, to be down and then get up and the immediate reaction is like fists in the air fight. I don't know, man. That's pretty, again, you could fall wherever you want on the political spectrum, but like, that's pretty tough. I mean,
it's tough to say otherwise.
Right?
It's tough to make a case otherwise, for sure. Regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah, man. Well, we got more and more to discuss. We're going to have some more people on the show. We've had some incredible guests in the past. Make sure to go back, check those out. And Gabe, the firefighter's name, Corey
Compatori.
Corey Compatori.
Yeah. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But yeah, Compatori.
Okay. Well, we appreciate all you guys for listening. As per usual, go back, check out the other episodes. And if you get value from these episodes, even if you're just like at the gym, banging some weights around, getting in your, bodybuilding workouts, or maybe getting in some of our new sand workouts, whatever you have going on, and you're hitting up these podcasts, we just really appreciate it. Hope you and your family continue to train hard and reach your potential. That's all I got, Gabe. You feeling good?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good.